Are you curious about Gestalt language processing? You are not alone. Join me, Corinne Smoose, and speech therapy PD for our podcast, The Gestalt Get Together. Our episodes try to balance the enthusiasm and excitement about GLP and its associated intervention ideas, as well as a healthy dose of skepticism about how to understand and integrate this paradigm shift into your career and the field at large. We hope that you can get together with us to learn more about Gestalts.
Welcome to SLP Learning Series, a podcast series presented by SpeechTherapyPD.com. The SLP Learning Series explores various topics of speech-language pathology. Each season dives deeper into a topic with a different host and guests who are leaders in the field. Some topics include stuttering, AAC, sports concussion, teletherapy, ethics, and more. Each episode has an accompanying audio course on SpeechTherapyPD.com and is available for 0.1 ASHA CEUs. Now, come along with us as we look closer into the many topics of speech-language pathology.
Right. Hello, everybody, and welcome. Welcome to our podcast mini-series, Advocacy for the Whole SLP, presented by Speech Therapy PD. Thank you so much for joining us for episode number 3, exploring workplace trends in speech pathology in 2024. This episode is offered for 0.1 ASHA CEUs. We are your hosts, Jessica Hunnemeter and Stephanie Reed-Fody. We're both co-owners of Speech Story Studios. And before we get started, I'd like to introduce one of my lovely co-hosts, Miss Jessica Hunnemeter. Some quick information about her. She holds her master's and her undergraduate degrees from Kean University, and she has a diverse background in early intervention, school-based services, and subacute rehab. She currently focuses on evidence-based practice therapy through in-person and teletherapy methods. She's licensed in multiple states: Pennsylvania, California, Florida, Alaska, Hawaii, and Wyoming. Jessica emphasizes cultural sensitivity in her practice and has presented on advocacy, teletherapy strategies, auditory processing disorders, and hearing screening in college students. Outside of work, she usually is exploring her current home base in Hawaii with her husband as a travel content creator. I love always talking about you. So much fun.
I mean, we've known each other for a very long time at this point, so I really enjoy talking about you too. And in fact, I'm going to do so. So introducing Dr. Stephanie Reed-Fody, who is a New Jersey state licensed and ASHA certified speech language pathologist with a decade of experience. She earned her Bachelor of Arts, Master's of Arts, and doctorate in speech language pathology from Kean University. I was just going to say from New Jersey. But it's from Kean University.
In New Jersey.
Yes, in New Jersey. Stephanie has extensive experience with children across various settings, specializing in stuttering, language disorders, auditory processing disorders, pragmatic language disorders, and alternative augmentative communication. She provides training for parents and educational staff and has worked with children diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, apraxia of speech, cerebral palsy, Down syndrome, and other conditions. It sounds like you work in a school. I know I said that last time, but you definitely work in a school.
I gave it away. I don't know.
I'm not quite sure.
There's something there. Like it seems so familiar, right?
Yeah, you just have to know it all. So financial disclosures. I am the owner of Pangea Speech Therapy LLC, co-owner of Speech Story Studios, and I received a speaker fee from SpeechTherapyPD.com. My non-financial disclosure is I am an ASHA member and Hawaii Speech Language Hearing Association member.
All right. And for my financial disclosures, I am also a co-owner of Speech Stereo Studios and received a speaker's fee from Speech Therapy PD. And for my non-financial disclosure, I am also an ASHA member and a New Jersey Speech Language Hearing Association member.
Fabulous. Okay, that's enough about us.
Yeah.
We have the coolest guest on with us today. I'm so excited to introduce Courtney Gebhart. She is so awesome. So I'm just going to go through and read a little bit about her. We'll go over some disclosures, and then we'll finally let her chat. So Courtney Gebhart is the founder of Metamorphosis Therapy Group, Inc. She has grown the practice to serve pediatric clients with speech and occupational therapy needs, including early intervention and short and long-term school contracting. She has more than 16 years of experience as a certified speech language pathologist, working in pediatrics, and extensive training in assessing and implementing assistive technology and augmentative and alternative communication systems. She has worked with a variety of disorders, including but not limited to autism, oral myofunctional disorders, dyslexia, speech sound disorder, late talkers, and bilingual assessments. She serves her community as a part-time adjunct lecturer at California State University, Fresno, where she teaches courses on language development and the education of exceptional children. Woo! That is a mouthful for sure. It sounds like you work in schools too, Courtney.
I do.
Yes. So financial disclosures for Courtney. She's the owner of Metamorphosis Therapy Group, Inc., which is a for-profit organization. She is a salaried staff of California State University, Fresno, and she received an honorarium from Speech Therapy PD for her podcast appearance. She doesn't have any relevant non-financial relationships at this time. However, I am so excited to introduce you. As a side note as well, I also work for Courtney. I am part of the Meta Therapy Group. That's where I know her. And I'm like really enamored with all of the things that you're doing, and you're like in everywhere. And I'm kind of in everywhere too. So I think that's why I'm like loving all of the things that you're doing, because it kind of makes me feel like, yes, I'm in the right place. I'm doing the right thing. I don't need to stay in one spot. I can like travel around and do things. So the other thing too is you really like rally your staff every day. And I think it's just awesome to see. It really is. So I'm fangirling on
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Welcome to our podcast. Yeah, Steph, take it away.
All right, so let's get to it. So after all nice introductions, we are here to talk about workplace advocacy. So just as a recap, the last 2 weeks we talked about the national level and the state level advocacy efforts, and where SLPs can go to find help, research, questions, and now we're continuing down that little funnel, the little narrowing down to talk about trends in different workplaces and how to advocate in those different workplaces. So when we first start talking about who we want to invite, so the first question we always like to ask our guests are, what is advocacy to you? So it's a very wide open question, but I love to hear what your point of view is.
Yeah, great question. Advocacy to me is good communication, and it really boils down to that. Listening as well as being able to communicate what it is that you desire.
Amazing.
I love it.
Amazing. I love it.
Now I was going to jump into the next one of just what are some things you think SLPs can expect to find in their workplace for support in their careers?
I think kind of going back to the advocacy question, I think it's really important for SLPs to ask good questions at the interview process. This is really the only opportunity that you are going to get to be able to ask tough questions, and really nothing is off the table. I think as SLPs, it's a female dominated field and we tend to shirk away from talking about money, but we have to be comfortable with that. And I think there's some things that if there's open and good communication, that it's going to really help any potential heartaches down the road. If you realize that you don't get annual raises, or you can't, get a raise every year, or there's no stipend after all, or this or this or that. So having good communication verbally, but also a written agreement to back that up is going to really help you understand all of the ins and outs as you kind of go through your career. Also, just as students, this is also your time to ask those questions as students are in graduate school. And sometimes we don't ask questions because we're so used to being told, what to do, and that this person, the professor is the expert. But we have to be comfortable with that. We have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, because those conversations are really needed, and they're going to really just help us, get to where we want to be in our careers and in our positions.
You hit on the two biggest things for me. One is making sure to ask the questions, and two is pay rates and that type of thing. I'm a huge advocate for making sure that you're getting paid what you're worth. I don't believe in working for free.
Nope.
I don't believe in, taking a rate that's below that of what I am able to provide with a master's degree that I worked really hard for. So, coming from somebody who employs, how many employees do you have at this point?
We have 43 employees, 30 something, mid 30s for therapists, and then the rest is my admin team.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
Amazing.
Awesome.
Amazing. And you started, so I guess I'm going to go back a little bit here. You started the company in 2016.
2018, it was founded. That first year, I did nothing with it. It was literally just getting all of the correct certificates, getting insurance going. And I saw my first client in May of 2019 as a home-based therapist. So I traveled to his home to see him.
Gosh. And so, I mean, it's only 5 years later from 2019.
Right. Yes.
Amazing.
I've really grown it. And I believe a lot of it is I just want to help as many kids as I can. But I really was passionate about what I was creating. I've worked in a lot of different settings prior to my own private practice. And this was a way for me to really build my therapy utopia, so to speak. So schools, I didn't like having to do yard duty. I didn't like having to be boxed into minutes, and that was tricky. So as a direct hire, you are. And, I worked in skilled nursing home, so I learned how to do all the coding and things like that. Also, has its challenges too. And then finally with private practice, I always saw myself being in private practice, of course, because I felt like I could, make clinical decisions based off of what I wanted. And I was okay with sending clients to another therapist if I didn't feel like they were a good fit. And then with the school contracts, I'm able to advocate for correct workload. I'm sure we'll get into that. But that has been a huge change. And I've worked in districts as a direct hire, and now I turn around and contract with them. And it's just a night and day difference. And I think a lot of it really does come down to advocating and telling people and being really precise and clear with what you want.
And just to add on to that, Courtney is so precise. She's so precise that it's like, there's no, not that there's no gray room, because I think there's gray room for every conversation, really, right? Like, I don't think that everything is black and white. There's definitely gray. But like, if we have a problem, and now I'm just fangirling still, if we have a problem, or if we have a question, I feel super comfortable talking with you and saying, hey, this is too much, or I don't know how I'm going to get this done. You come up with all of these really quick ideas. And, even if it's like, okay, the school wants this, but that's not in the contract, then you're like, nope, that's not happening then. So I think the clarity too, like being super clear, is something that makes being an advocate really, really great too. So yeah, kudos to you again. Half of this episode is just going to be me fangirling, so just be prepared.
Yeah, definitely. And I think a lot of that too, of course you want a written contract to back up anything that's verbal, because it helps both parties be able to go back and look at things, because nobody can be expected to hold everything in their head. And I learned that as a mom, if it's not written down, it doesn't exist. And pregnancy brain is real, but you have to have things written down, and it really does protect both parties. So if there's something that was discussed, but it's not written, ask about it. We talked about this. Why isn't it in my employment agreement? And then certain states are at will states. So you can be let go for any reason or no reason at all.
Right.
So every law is a little bit different in the states, but where I'm at in California, we are an at will employer. And so that's also stated in my agreement that the employee can leave the relationship, or I can terminate the relationship at any time too. But having that written backup is going to help you a lot in the long run.
Agreed.
And have you ever had to modify it? Like, I know it seems like sometimes, obviously we all know IEPs change, laws change, and just is there an easier way to request, or like you see like, oh, I want to add something, changing something, or just like, this is not working for me. Like, is there like guidance of getting to that or changing that?
Certainly. So when you are wanting to change something in your employment agreement, and I use like my private practice, for example, because I have a lot more flexibility with being able to change employment agreements, having what's working for you and what's not working for you. It's having that open dialogue and that conversation. Sometimes therapists, productivity seems like a dirty word. It's really just a way that we're measuring how much billable time we're able to bill for. So in private practice, I take insurance. The rates aren't great. It's pretty minimal profit margins. For those of you that think that private practice owners are swimming in the dough, we're not. We're hustling too. But knowing that information really helps us decide, how much we're paying our therapists, or helps a good company decide, because of course we can't pay our therapists more than they're bringing in. But there's other incentives that potentially that employer could offer to you. Like maybe you have childcare that you need to flex your hours on. You need to start early or leave early, or, you can work a longer day on a different day. So being really upfront and asking about that information and having that dialogue is so important, and do it before it becomes a problem. You don't want to be, in HR's office and, going through a write-up situation or a written warning or a verbal warning before your boss is saying, hey, I noticed that you slipped out 5 minutes early, because some employers, will do that. So being communicative is certainly a huge part of advocacy.
Definitely. Definitely. And then in speaking, so your role too, private practice, but then also at the university level.
Right.
So in that respect, I guess, how you definitely advocate for your students. Can you talk a little bit about how you advocate for them, what it's like for them? I mean, you're seeing both, like SLPs already in the field, and then SLPs like baby SLPs, right?
So the college professor gig. So I have undergraduate students, and undergraduate is a whole different beast than graduate students. And I've worked with both. And the undergraduate students, they tend to be a little bit more rogue. Right now it's finals week, and things get interesting in finals week. But again, that's where your syllabus comes into play. And I really view my role at the university is I'm preparing these young professionals to have a job and have deadlines, and not listen to excuses on why you can't get your, homework in time, or why you missed the deadline, or why you didn't show up, or whatever, because again, it's all in the syllabus. And often if I'll have a student ask me a question, or how, why is it like this, and sometimes I'll refer them back to their own paper, and I'll say, well, I want you to read it, and I want you to tell me what resources you use to determine your score. So I don't give people answers. I make them work for it a little bit. And
Yeah.
I think that that's so important for young professionals, because we are used to instant access with our phones and AI and, all of those things, but really empowering them to think analytically and with problem solving skills is going to just help us out in the long run with our future clinicians. So it starts with the syllabus, again, a written document, and I refer back to it all the time.
Oh my gosh, that's such a good idea to refer back
That's a
to the
yeah.
syllabus, really.
Yeah.
I mean, I
Like
guess
your first contracts.
yeah,
Exactly. It is. It's a contract. It's an agreement between myself and my students, and it's on file with the university. So if there's ever a question that comes in, and I've had to go through my own syllabus and look at it and say, oh, I didn't write that. And, maybe that's where that gray area falls, because of course we have gray areas, and, we have to, we're all human too at the end of the day. And of course I might make some, special exceptions, but that contract initially is what I'm really looking at and going back to.
that's a great idea. Remembering the contract. And then the same thing too, Steph, in your position, right? Like looking at your school contract and making sure that everything, right? So if you're working in a school, you have a contract too, even as an employee, right? So making sure that all of those expectations are met. And if they're not, also making sure that you advocate for your needs. So what I'm hearing so far, communication is key and your documentation is also key. Love it. Love it. All right, Steph. Next question.
All right. So I guess we'll tie it in. I feel like also hearing you talk, Courtney, it hit upon a lot of our key ideas, which I think a lot of people listening are have a lot of questions. The first thing we try to see are like what the most common struggles SLPs have. And I know you've been in so many different work settings. We came up with 3, but I wanted to see if we hit those 3 and if there's more that you think of. So of course, the first one we always hit is caseload versus workload.
Yep.
We'll get into it because I know it's going to be just a great conversation. Productivity. And I think lastly, I also just think of just understanding what we do. I know I even look at like working just, again, I work in a school, of all the people I work with, and I assume, oh, this is what you do. And I know I should take a step back and really know, well, what do you do? And like just reflecting on it and like learning how we can work together more. So I want to see if there's any other ideas, and we'll elaborate and get into some ideas.
Yeah, I think you really hit on them. I think the biggest one that I hear a lot from many SLPs in many different settings is I'm taking work home or there's too much to do. And I remember, and I think I kind of hacked it early on because when I was a beginning SLP, I was like, I'm not taking work home. That's my time. And for me, it was really about creating systems that were sustainable. So I didn't have to work beyond my duty days. And I think that that's something that we really struggle with as, kind of type A, for the most part, personalities. I consider myself like a type A minus or a type B plus, but that is really challenging for us to not do like this absolute perfect job. But in almost every single setting, not everything is going to be perfect all the time. And that's okay.
Agreed. And that's why we get along, because I would say I'm like B plus A minus for the most of the time. Do you agree, Steph? Is that me too?
Yeah, I would say so. I agree.
Steph is ultimate type A. She is ultimate type A to the fact, yes, you are. You get all of your projects done like 3 weeks beforehand. And I'm there like 2 minutes beforehand, like, oh, I got it.
I see my syllabus. I'm like, okay, I have 10 things that, I have to do this. I'm like, I'm getting it done. I don't like to sit and wait around. I don't do well under pressure. So I like to get it done. So I don't know if it's type A plus, but I like to get things organized and just keep it done.
Just accept it.
But, I know I also like to keep things organized. So again, just going back to that like caseload versus workload, what are some ideas of how you've advocated to keep it focused? And also like, we always say like, we don't want to take work home, but like, in the back, I'm like, I know it has to get done. Okay, like how can I help myself not have to do that in the future, or not to do it later, another time.
Right. I think we hear caseload versus workload a lot, and it really depends too on the context that we're talking about. So like in a school district, we see that a lot, and we see a lot of people, really wanting to advocate for that for their district. And the best way to do that for non-speech people who are talking to district people is to put it into perspective for them. And I like to really think in terms of, numbers. And the numbers don't lie. So when I come to an admin and I say, well, every kid that I tested this year, it took me 10 hours from start to finish. And I don't have, as you can see in my schedule, I only have 2-hour chunks of time. And in addition to that, an IEP prep, an annual takes this amount of time. So we can kind of do ourselves a favor by putting some numbers to that, because our district people, they get hit with these kinds of asks all the time. Well, I don't have time. We'll hire another person. So I really like to think of that in numbers, because then you can really break it down for somebody by amount of weeks. And so, I mean, that's one thing, like for those of you that are in a school setting and you're trying to advocate for a workload approach. Another way that I've seen that done is assigning numbers to specific types of students. So, a if you use a rubric, like a 1 through 4 rubric, like a 1 is like your Artic only kiddo that's on an IEP, and a 4 might be like that special needs kiddo that's in a self-contained classroom that has a really needy parent or is highly litigious. So those kinds of things can really put a lot of different weight on your caseload as a school SLP, that you don't have the ability to just say, I'm just not going to work with that student anymore because, I just don't want to. Well, we can't do that in the schools, as we know, but really in other settings too, for that advocacy piece and that workload, that workload versus caseload. Again, it comes down to numbers, and being really honest with yourself and doing a time audit on yourself will also really help you see, what am I spending my time on? Because sometimes those answers, you may not like those answers, and that's okay, because you might realize that, I just blew 30 minutes in the hallway talking with another therapist about a TV show. Well, that's not productive time, and so I think we need to also be ready to embrace the honesty that's going to come out of that time audit, and then really think, what do you want to do with that time instead, so that way you're not bringing your work home.
Nailed it. Because, and I would say that's probably one reason why I can't work fully in person, because I am the person at the water jug who I can chat to anybody, talk to a wall. My husband's like, I'm not coming into the grocery store with you because all you're going to do is talk to people. And this is after work, right? So like still talking. So I think you brought up amazing points. And I think, and we've talked about this too before in another episode about the caseload piece, to go to Ash's website. And I know this is going to give Steph some anxiety. She's already kind of like shaking her head over here. They have a caseload calculator or a workload calculator. It's really, and Steph is still shaking her head in the background. Thanks for listening. And I understand why it would give you anxiety. And the reason is because that there's a lot of boxes, there's a lot of things to click on. And then you're like, well, what am I spending my time on, right? So it's really hard to kind of delineate. I use something called Toggle because I am switching between so many different like workloads between different schools. So I toggle my time between, okay, I'm at this school, I'm at this school, I'm at this school, I'm at this school. And that kind of helps me. And then also, just punching in to your job, right? Like thinking about a punch in, but the having those numbers, I think, is key. So yeah, definitely key, because I mean, we're supposed to be evidence-based, right? So we need the evidence to show like, hey, I can't do this. So I guess if we are continuing it down this way, if we find that our caseload or our workload is like way too much for us, you as an employer, Courtney, if somebody were to come up to you, how would somebody, besides having the numbers, is there a way that somebody could advocate that you would be able to help them a little bit more? Is there something that somebody could say and you're like, oh, I can help you with this? Like, how would that look?
Yeah, I ask a lot of questions. So if staff come to me and they say, I'm feeling really overwhelmed, or, whatever the case may be, I just start by asking questions, well, how are you feeling about that? And then I even get into the weeds. Let's look at your schedule. Tell me about this kid. Tell me about this kid. And I'm looking for solutions, and I want them to find their own solutions too. And sometimes the reason why we feel overwhelmed, again, do your time audit. It could be because you have 2 really rough kids in a row. And maybe that day is just a really rough day because you're kind of anticipating all of those things, because you know that it's going to be rough because you've got these 2 hard kids or these 2 rough groups, or you have this staff meeting that, is really bothering you, or whatever the case may be, and I think I've learned this from my OTs, where we have kind of a sensory cup, and little things can really irritate us throughout the day. And, we can kind of pay attention to, well, what's happening with my cup? If I'm having a rough morning and I get to work and then I snap at somebody, it's because I'm snapping at them because of all of the other things that have already happened in my day. So I think coming to a supervisor with facts again, is going to really help your case, and also coming with solutions. So I always ask my graduate students to do this when I work with them in a clinic setting. If they have an issue with how therapy is going, I'll ask them, well, what have you tried? What do you think the next steps are? Why do you think that didn't work? Because again, you finding out your own answers to your problems is going to be much more powerful than a supervisor figuring them out or anything else. And the same way, if maybe you have a supervisor who's not very helpful with solving problems, asking them questions also feels non-confrontational. How can I make this day a little bit easier for me? How can I shift my time around so that I'm able to, do this sort of duty? So coming in and asking those specific questions, if you truly don't know the answer, and getting them to help you a little bit can also be a great strategy.
It's the moment too where I'm going to like shrink Courtney and put her on my shoulder to remind me throughout the day, like, hey, how did you feel about this? Right? To turn it into a therapy session. Cause I mean, it's great. It's really awesome. I love that.
I love to ask because I just came up today. I had a department meeting, and I always hear my supervisor in the back. He's not a speech therapist. I do love working with him, but always I hear him always saying the magic number is 5. So even in my, ABA, high profile parents are like, you can fit 5 in a group, and I'm like, no, how? But like, no, and it's like, but per the IV, you can go up to 5. So we're good. And it's just like, I feel like I'm sure a lot of people can say like, oh, I can hear that. I can hear exactly the words saying, like, and as you being, I'm sure you've talked to administration, what would be a way to approach that? Like what facts could be used to help work with that, or just, because I'm sure they're also going to have their facts with them and say, well, yeah, it's here, it's in the IEP, so we're fine. I'm like, no, but I can't do it.
So, I mean, again, coming back with, real life scenarios. So maybe you're in a situation where your group size is really big, and really kind of taking it back to that school setting. We know as therapists that large groups mean slower to minimal progress. You're not getting a lot of data. And you can say that, you're essentially not providing a legally defensive service to the student because you just don't have the data to support it. And I felt like this was a really big aha moment that we learned a lot as therapists when things shifted to COVID. At that time, I was a direct hire with a district, and we switched our students to doing individual one-on-one meetings. And some of them were as short as 5 minutes. And these kids were getting the same amount of data as they would be getting in a group of 3 in 30 minutes. And that to me was really big. And I thought, we're taking this kid out of his classroom to be able to provide this service. So, kind of thinking along, like getting out of the box a little bit and thinking, how can I make this service? How can I make my supervisor see that a group of 5 maybe isn't in the best interest of the student? And when you shift your thought process that way and don't say that it's not in your best interest because you're the employee, right? You're going to have to do what they say no matter what. But when you shift it to making it about your patient or about your students, you're going to see a big difference in how that response is going to come off, because all of a sudden now we want to collaborate that. I just used this strategy for a student that the team was trying to delay an IEP on and push it to the next year. And I wanted it done because I want it, done so that way I don't have to remember all of the details come August. But I used it as, do you think this is the best route for your student? And it really worked. And I got what I wanted, which was a meeting this school year.
Good on you.
Nice. I love hearing that. That's awesome.
And I love changing the perspective too, from like me versus them, because that's what it should be. It should be for the patient or the client or the student, right? Great question. I love that. I feel like, okay, so we hit the caseload, we hit the productivity, we hit the understanding what to do. How about we talk about if we think we're not a good communicator in terms of like emails. I love writing emails personally. I like to like communicate that way, because then it's very succinct, it's written, it's all there. How, if you feel like you're not good at writing emails, or if you feel like you're not very good at advocating for your needs, because we're saying, yes, you have to ask these questions.
Yeah.
But if you're not sure what to even ask, where can you go to kind of get some more information, or what kind of made you feel more comfortable being independent with asking those questions, would you say?
I kind of did some, self review of my own communication style. And what I really found is that, and I think emails, number one, are not the best way to communicate.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just put that out there. They're not the best way because they can be really misconstrued.
Yes.
And same with text messages, right? So I've had a lot of messages go completely awry because of a text message or an email. I know that I prefer to communicate verbally, especially if maybe the stakes are high, because I can get a lot more out of that one-on-one verbal communication because I can gauge things better. I mean, us as SLPs, we're the communication experts. So that pragmatic language piece really does come into play, and you can use it to your advantage when you're communicating with your communication partner. So I can feel their intonation. I can see what their body language does, and I can control my responses a lot better, because in an email, you're essentially tasked with laying your chips out on the table. And if your communication partner, I keep wanting to say opponent, because sometimes it is when we're advocating for ourselves, but when you're sending an email, you do not have the advantage of knowing when that person will respond. So sometimes emails, if they wait a long time to respond, they might be thinking about it, and then they're going to put you in a weird spot. Do I do a follow-up? How do I negotiate this? So I really am very tactical with my responses that way. I don't like to negotiate things in email at all, ever. Mainly because, not necessarily because it's a written, dialogue of things, but also because I think that you lose that human element. And when people put space in between you and answering your email, you kind of either you lose momentum, or you allow them to have extra time to really think about it and come up with a different solution. And I will use my email to my advantage when either I'm upset and I don't want to fire off a quick response. So I usually will put some space between myself and the response. And I also coach my staff to do this a lot too. If we get an upset parent that is calling us, or they've emailed us, something, I tell them, don't respond today, because right now the emotions are really high and we're not thinking with, the correct part of our brain. We have to, put some space in between that. So just kind of pay attention to how you are also as a communicator, and that's going to really help you find your kind of find your stride in how do you want to communicate. But again, I really advise against email communication for any sort of negotiation or advocacy. I really much prefer a verbal, or at least a phone call. I really like Zoom. So even if they're not able to do a in person, I really try to do a Zoom, because I can get a lot more out of that.
So you're reading a lot through I mean, it makes total sense as SLPs. Absolutely makes total sense. And the other thing, I mean, fangirl number 7, you check in with all of your employees every single week.
I do.
Every single week. If you can't make it on Zoom, you will send an email, but you will always check and make sure, hey, do you really need me? Right. So I think having someone who is available and who makes you important, and especially as the founder, like not all companies are that way, right? I've worked with several companies where the founder became the founder and then they're gone. They're off doing other things and they're not involved. You are still doing therapy. You are still present. You're still in the game, so much so that you know all of your employees. You know which days I'm working, like it's just, I think that's something important too, even when you're looking for positions, making sure that you're getting the right vibe from the companies that you're applying to. So I think Zoom is amazing for sure, because you can get all of those like nonverbal physical cues from people during conversation as well. And I love the idea of not negotiating during email as well. Awesome.
Yeah.
You have to lay all your chips on the table, and then they know your next move. I've learned just with my negotiation, I've had clients who, for example, they couldn't pay their bills and didn't want to pay their bill and they owed us a lot of money. And I thought, I could just run their credit card on file. I know it's good. Or I can, and risk them being very upset, word of mouth. Bad word of mouth is not great either. But I set up and this parent in particular really wanted to communicate through email. And I thought, nope, I have to get you to where I'm at my vantage point. And I refused to negotiate anything with this particular parent. And I set up a meeting where I could have a phone conversation with them. And at the end of that conversation, I was listening, and sometimes we want to talk. We're the SLP. We want to talk. Nope, you have to listen. That's that other part of language. And kind of that sitting back and letting him tell his story and letting him air his frustrations, meeting him where he's at. Oh yeah, that is really frustrating that insurance did X, Y, and Z, kind of commiserating a little bit with that individual to, yes, I know that those caseloads are super high everywhere across the district. We're all feeling really stressed about that, and then kind of launching into, well, do you think that I could, could we hire a sub and they could take 10 students off of my caseload, and just kind of starting somewhere where you're asking, and maybe you really want 20 kids. Start with 30 and then negotiate from there,
Yeah.
and don't be afraid to kind of go for that pie in the sky offer. So, I mean, that's all part of that negotiating. So you can kind of use that. So instead of thinking negatively, like, oh, they're never going to take, 10 kids off of my schedule, we'll ask for 20, and you might be surprised when they hit you with 10.
Yes. Preach. I love that.
I love it. And I love when you're very comfortable talking about ask those questions, or like pay raise, go for it. Like, how did you get I know a lot. I'm sure you work with a lot of students. Like, how do you do that? How do you get so comfortable with asking that? Have you just found is there certain phrases you use, or just a strategy, or just? I know I hate when people say you just need experience. It's time, and that is part of it. I always remember in grad school, when our professor, oh, you'll know it in time. I'm like, I don't have time. I need to do this now.
Right.
But how do you is there any strategies you've had to get more comfortable with it and just getting it out there? Because I know that's definitely something I'm like, oh, I couldn't talk about that,
Yeah.
How do you feel comfortable with that?
Yeah, it's definitely a journey. So I didn't say it takes time. I said it's a journey. And it's always a little bit of working on yourself, right? So I've definitely read books. I have some of my favorites. I mean, if it's okay, I can share one of them.
Yeah,
Is that
please.
okay? So I really like Chris Voss. He's a former FBI negotiator, and he has a book called Never Split the Difference. I listened to that book 3 times when I had to go through a really big negotiation, and it worked to my advantage. And so I think just constantly looking for those skills to, help yourself in those communication opportunities. But also, people wouldn't guess this about me, but I really am quite an introvert. I really am not. I know you wouldn't guess it, but I really enjoy, if I don't want to go to a social event, I kind of dig my heels in and I don't really want to go. And so for me, it was a shift of my mindset of thinking, I don't really want to go to this, but what are some opportunities that are here for me? So as a business owner, there's always opportunities, and it makes it more interesting for me now to go to different social events where it's my husband's party, and we're in completely different lines of work, and I'll get to go to those, and it's I'll kind of make it my goal. You kind of have to have your own intrinsic goal. Okay, I'm gonna meet somebody, and I'm gonna, find out if they have any kids that have had speech therapy, like, I don't know, whatever it is, but you kind of have to trick yourself into it a little bit. If you're the
Mhm.
staff member that really, just kind of wants to hide out in your closet and, at school or whatever, go into the lunchroom and be intentional. And that doesn't mean you have to eat your lunch awkwardly at the table while the second teachers are on the other side of the room, but just be intentional and go up to them and have a purpose. And the more you practice it, the more comfortable you're going to be. So looking for those opportunities to embrace that uncomfortableness is going to help you get really comfortable with that communication. So we need to work on it ourselves too, especially if you've worked on things when they're easier, like going and telling a teacher, oh, I got to screen your student, but I don't think that they need therapy, and that they're going to have a fit. Practice that conversation because that it's going to be an uncomfortable conversation, but at the end of the day, it's your professional judgment. Nobody can force you to put a kid on an IEP, right? Of course.
Mhm.
But then those kinds of situations are going to lead up to even bigger events. So when you need to negotiate for a raise, or when your caseload has blossomed so much that you need a SLPA or you need a part-time therapist to help you out, the more you practice, the more you're going to be game ready for the big one.
Mhm.
I love that. My husband is a digital marketer, so I know all about Chris Voss and all about Russell Brunson and all about all these other guys. And I think that hits on a huge thing of going outside of the speech realm every once in a while
Yeah.
and looking into like the mindset or looking into, because we said we are mostly women, right, in this field, looking at the financials, looking at other things. Like when I think of when I first came out of school and I was like, oh, people do, like, I don't know what business is. I don't know what that means. I just like talking and like kids and like that type of thing. But to me now, as I've grown, right, through little baby speech therapist to big girl speech therapist, there's other things out there that are super interesting. So like the pay shortages, advocacy, all of these things are also in other areas in the world, right? So there are other books, there are other things besides speech therapy, things that are out there that could help you kind of negotiate and learn how to negotiate. I think using that as kind of the background is genius, really, to think forward. One of the books that I've really recommended to everyone. I actually have it on my desk because I'm obsessed with her. It's Rachel Rogers, and it's We Should All Be Millionaires. Have you guys read that one? We Should All Be. Oh my
Yeah, I
gosh,
remember that.
she's amazing. She's a lawyer, and she talks about how she went about to become a millionaire, starting from like nothing to where she is now. She's super empowering, super great mindset. And, reading this as a speech therapist for somebody who like, okay, I've worked a job where now I'm finally opening up my practice as well, right? So it's just so endearing to hear other people in other places using really good strategies and resources. So definitely Chris Voss, definitely Rachel Rogers, definitely get out there and read other things is what I would suggest too. How about you,
Yeah.
Steph?
No, I agree with all those. I'm just curious, is there any other resources that you've used, Courtney, that you felt as helpful for you in like developing this?
I really like the Chris Voss stuff.
Okay.
It's a podcast too, so that's fun to listen to. But again, it's practicing it. So going out
Mhm.
and looking for those opportunities, and and also I find just kind of sitting back as an SLP and kind of watching communication and kind of trying some of his little strategies, because it can be overwhelming, but being interested in that other person and building a relationship, because if you don't have a relationship, your efforts aren't going to get you very far. So I really see that a lot of things tend to be very transactional, meaning, what are you going to do for me? And I want more money. And it doesn't provide you're not showing, well, what's the value of me getting a raise? What can I bring to you as an agency by getting this raise? Because that's the next question that me as an employer would potentially have, well, what do I get with that? So, there has to kind of be that ebb and flow, and having that relationship first and foremost. And that's why I check in with my employees, because I want to know how things are going. And if things aren't going well, I want to know now, not in 4 weeks when, someone's like, oh, she put in her resignation. Like, oh no, what happened? Like, we could have fixed some things. But I think just practicing good communication as a whole is really helpful, and getting us out of our little speech room closet. So getting out of that closet in the school, if you're in a acute care setting, go to a different floor that you're not used to seeing. Oh, I'm the speech therapist. What do you guys do around here? And then, just getting in good communication with other people. So that way they see you as a value, like, so that they want to keep you around and they'd like to pay you well too.
Yes. Yes. We deserve it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Love it.
I love that. Yeah. I think the ideas and the strategies, the resources, I think that for me has taken some time to kind of get there. Would you say it's taken you some time to kind of grow and grow on a journey through that as well?
I think so. I realized that I kind of liked it. And this is kind of what I do. I'm like, I really don't like this. I'm good, but I'm going to be really good at it. So I kind of do that as a challenge to myself. And I challenge everybody to do that. And how I started with the biggest example is teaching the R sound. I thought, oh man, I'm really bad at this, but I want to be really good at it. So if you can really pour yourself into learning one skill at a time, you'll be really surprised at how far you come. And now they call me the R queen. I'm great at R. I love teaching R, but I used to hate it. So, you can improve your skill set. Just be open-minded and be willing to accept feedback, and be willing to practice and not do well either. And that's okay.
So I heard you say taking, like, getting feedback. I know most of us, again, I think are B+ to super type A.
Yep.
And taking that feedback. I know not every supervisor is very poetic about it, or just like they're not sure, even, so like they say, like, oh, either you do a great job, or like, well, you could be doing this, or even like getting outside feedback from, like, a private therapist, or, oh, my OT said we need to do this in speech. Like, there's always outsiders giving their input. I know, at least in New Jersey, we get a lot of input from behaviorists, and it's like, okay, like, how do I navigate that without it, like, like, oh, why am I so, like, I'm not the best therapist, or like, oh, stay in your own lane, don't come to me, like, is there, like, strategies you have for dealing with that?
Yeah. Get them to talk about themselves. So people like to talk about themselves. Oh, tell me how you handle it.
Yeah.
And sit back, and
Okay.
you don't even you don't have to care, right? But
Yeah.
if you get them to talk about themselves, then they're going to feel really warm and fuzzy, and they're going to like you, and really all they're doing is talking about themselves the whole time. And then you can kind of use that to kind of kind of navigate in, like, yeah, that's always been a struggle for me. Do you have any tips for me? We love to talk about ourselves. We love to, just as humans, to be able to be better than other people. So let them. Let them. It's okay.
Okay.
So just
That's a
let
very
it,
valid point. Yeah.
yeah, let it
I think
be.
of a lot of my heavy hitting parents are just like, yeah, just like, oh, tell me more about them. I'm like, oh, great. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, because you're not going to, there's just battles that you just don't want to fight, right? And we've all been in situations where the other person was going to be right no matter how wrong they were. And it doesn't matter if they're a parent, an administrator, another professional, but you have to almost let them win sometimes, and kind of be more tactful on your strategy. So just kind of think, okay, well, what else can I potentially get out of this situation? So, I've been told, oh, well, when I was in the schools, oh, my private therapist says they do it like that. Oh, really? Well, tell me, what is she working on? And so it's like, I'm not going to do the same thing necessarily, but it just helps them feel like they've been validated. And that goes back to your relationship. You're going to have a better time getting people to do things that you want to do when you have a relationship and they trust you.
My husband always says, half of business is being cool. Like, you have to be cool, right? If you're not cool or you're not relatable or you're not interested in the other person, then what's the point? What are they going to get out of you? Right? Like it's kind of it is kind of transactional in a way, but you'll do something more for somebody that you like versus somebody that you don't like.
Absolutely.
Right? So being agreeable, that's the thing for sure. And I have to say, there was, this is when I was a baby SLP, and I love to share this story because it makes me furious. But I was working in a school district in New Jersey, and I was getting observed, and the supervisor was I think it was the assistant superintendent maybe, and had a great session. This kid was up and down. We were dancing. We were getting lots of language. And I had the multiply disabled children, right? So multiple disabilities. And it was so fun. It was so endearing. Like, I thought I was doing great. I couldn't wait to hear what he had to say. And the only thing he said to me at the end of this observation was, "Why do you have a coffee cup on the table? Why do you have a coffee cup on the table?" And I said to him, I don't remember what I said to him. I remember calling Steph afterwards and just kind of losing my mind, because some people feel that, like he had nothing to say but the coffee cup, right? So to me, I don't know. I actually left that school right after that, number of reasons. But I think taking some of that into account of, sometimes people aren't going to know and they're not going to be able to comment anyways, right? And Steph is huge into supervision. That's like your big thing, is supervision and making sure that it's good supervision. So yeah, I don't know. In that case, if I could go back 10 years from now and advocate for myself in a different way, I feel like I would have so much more to say versus what I probably said then. And I think about this story quite a lot, about how about the coffee cup, really, and I'm sure everybody who's listening they've also had similar situations too, and making sure to advocate and learn, and I think that was what we've brought up in the past couple of sessions as well, is just continue to learn. Continue to broaden the things that you do. I never in my right mind thought I would open or, do the things that I'm doing now, truthfully. Never, ever. So I think, yeah, I'm just excited to be where I am now versus a baby SLP. So thank you for teaching those little itty bitty babies SLPs on advocating. Any other last things you want to add in about advocacy? Anything else that we didn't touch on that you kind of want to talk about?
I just think that, really going back to making sure that you completely understand everything in agreements is another thing. So if you don't understand a certain word, look it up. There's no shame in that game. So that is going to help you really fully understand that entire big picture. So a big part of advocacy, and it's really kind of our job too, is to tell people what we do and share with them, this is what I have to do. This is what I'm legally obligated to do. And that is going to help when they are understanding of the value that you bring to their organization, their company, their school, then they are going to want to help support you even more. So it kind of goes beyond just get out of your office every once in a while and, go say hi to a couple teachers or a couple nurses or whatever the case may be, but be present. And, really, you don't have to, be the PTA president or anything like that, but just be visible every once in a while, and you can decide when that is. Choose those opportunities.
Agreed. We've had some people comment saying that we need to ask questions, we need to bring curiosity, good communication is key. So obviously good communication is key. Collaboration means non-confrontation.
Yes.
Collaboration means non-confrontation. That is a huge thing. I think, to consider. Collaboration means non-confrontation. I can think of many times where, hey, you didn't put the dishes away. Like, if I had gone about it a different way, it might have worked better in my favor, right? And then someone else said, verbal communication is the best way. Right. And I think that's a key too, because like we said before, you can see all sorts of things non-verbally that you don't see in a text message or an email, right? So making sure that that's kind of top of mind is super important. Moving on from here, Courtney, is there anything that you guys are working on with Meta? Anything that you want to share, that you guys have events going on or anything like that?
Yeah, so we consistently have additional events. Like, we try to do quarterly events for our staff, for staff development. We're heading into summer right now, so summer programs tend to be really fun for our staff. But yeah, just generally we're growing and looking for more awesome members to join our virtual SLP team, as well as our in-person team, and looking for some OTs and CODAs as well. So we're constantly looking for awesome talent that's looking for different opportunities with us.
I love that. So where can people find you, Courtney?
Yeah, so we're pretty active on our Instagram. So we go by Meta for short. So Meta Therapy Group is our Instagram handle. And then our website also has some good links to it as well. So that's, metatherapygroup.com. So all of those are great places to kind of catch up with us, watch for tips and tricks, watch for any sort of CEU events that we're hosting. So that's in person as well as virtual ones that we will have.
I love it. And you guys were just at a rodeo too?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. So in my town, Clovis Rodeo is really big. I'm an equestrian myself. So super fun event. We got a lot of, great publicity with that. Super fun. The rodeo girls will bring around flags. And so they had a metamorphosis flag, and we got to be in the parade. So just a really fun time. We love supporting different community events and different community organizations.
Courtney, you're the best. I'm so obsessed. Thank you so much for agreeing to chat with us. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Yeah. And Steph, I'll let you take it away.
All right. Thank you, Courtney. I hope you guys, all listeners, you got some great ideas and hope add it to your journey as an SLP. And thank you all again for joining. And hopefully we'll see you guys next week for episode number 4. We're so excited. 4.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good bye. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for today's course. To complete the course, you must log into your account and complete the quiz and the survey. If you have indicated that you are part of the ASHA registry and entered both your ASHA number and a complete mailing address in your account profile prior to course completion, we will submit earned CEUs to ASHA. Please allow 1 to 2 months from the completion date for your CEUs to reflect on your ASHA transcript. Please note that if this information is missing, we cannot submit to ASHA on your behalf. Thanks again for joining us. We hope to see you next time. Each episode comes with an accompanying audio course on speechtherapypd.com, available for a 0.1 ASHA CEU. And just for our listeners, get $20 off any subscription with promo code SLPLearn20. Speechtherapypd.com is run by SLPs for SLPs. They've got the largest library of ASHA CE eligible courses out there, and they're adding fresh content every week. Remember, use the code SLPLearn20 to get $20 off access to over 1,000 courses for an entire year. Head over to speechtherapypd.com for more information and start earning CEs today. Thanks for tuning in to the SLP Learning Series. And don't forget, speechtherapypd.com is your go-to for all things ASHA CEUs. Your positive reviews and support mean the world to us, and we'd love for you to drop us a quick review and hit that subscribe button.